agencies that are involved in the transportation planning process. This input enables us to avoid, minimize, or mitigate detrimental impacts to the environment and resources within our planning area. Allison or Nat, could you advance to the next slide? We'll review a brief agenda of this afternoon's webinar. We're going to provide an overview and process. We'll talk about some of the milestones to date in terms of existing conditions for our transportation system, a land use scenario planning effort that informed the projects that our member jurisdictions submitted, as well as phase one engagement, really to make residents and agencies aware that we were undertaking this plan last summer. So some of the more recent work is the roadway project ranking and evaluation, as well as the phase two engagement, which began in June of this year and concluded on July 19th. We'll talk about some of the upcoming and ongoing work associated with the 2055 MTP, and then we'll wrap up and answer any questions that participants have in this webinar. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Allison Flewitt with Kimley Horn for her introduction, and we'll also do brief introductions here with all of the participants. So go ahead, Allison.
Thanks, Neil. I am Allison Flewitt. As Neil mentioned, I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates, and I am the project manager on the consultant side for the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So excited to be with you all today. I'm joined by Nat Hayward. You'll be hearing from the two of us going through most of the agenda items that Neil has teed up for us today. But before we do so, we wanted to begin with some quick introductions, just give all of us the chance to hear who's on the call today. I'll begin with, you've heard from me and Nat and Neil, but I would like CRTPO staff to maybe begin with our introductions. So if we could just have Travis, Merritt, and Judy in that order, quickly come off mute and introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Travis Johnson. I'm a transportation planner with the CRTPO. Judy?
Judy, you can hop on next with your introduction. You're on mute.
I think Judy might have been troubleshooting some live stream stuff, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Merritt. I'm the community engagement coordinator with CRTPO, and along with Judy, did a lot of work with the public engagement process throughout the MTP second phase.
Very good. Judy, you want to introduce yourself now?
Hello. Hi, I'm Judy Dellert with CRTPO. I'm another one of our public information officers and really glad to see all of you here with us today. Looking forward to hearing some good discussion.
Great, thank you all. Do we have anyone else on with CRTPO? I think that's it. I'm just going to go down the list of the folks that we have on the Zoom call. If you wouldn't mind, just come off mute briefly and introduce yourself when I call your name. And I'll also just caveat that not everybody has a full name that shows up when I see you on the Zoom. So I'm going to do my best, and I may just be reading what appears here. So just hop off mute and introduce yourself and who you are with. We will begin with Christy Brantley.
Good afternoon. I'm Christy Brantley with the State Historic Preservation Office, and I work with local governments across the state.
Thank you, Christy. Next up, Brian Phillips.
Hello, I'm Brian Phillips. I am the Technical Services Section Chief for the Division of Air Quality.
Thank you, Brian. I have V.L. Baker. Oh, and I see you, Ginny. You just posted in your chat. Ginny Baker, a basin planner for the Yadkin River Basin for the NC Division of Water Quality. Thanks so much. All right, next we have Alex J.
Alex Jones, North Carolina Department of Agriculture, Environmental Programs.
Thank you. Alyssa Calderhead.
Hi there, Alyssa Calderhead, Sustainability Analyst and Public Transit Advisory Co-Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Alia Singh White.
Hi, Alia Singh White. I'm with EPA Region 4 NEPA program.
Thank you. Bert Lynn.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Bert Lynn, Capital Planning with Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation.
Thank you. Bill Thunberg.
Good afternoon. Bill Thunberg with the Lake Norman Regional Transportation Commission.
Thank you, Bill. Chris Matthews.
Hey everyone, Chris Matthews, Division Director for Nature Preserves and Natural Resources with Mecklenburg County Park and Rec.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, Drew Gartner.
Hey everybody, I'm Drew Gertner. I'm the Senior Manager of Economic and Land Development at University City Partners.
All right, thank you, Drew. EK Groundwater.
Yep, I'm Elise Groundwater. I'm NCDOT Congestion Management Project Manager.
Thank you, Elise. Erin Cheeley.
Erin Cheeley, NCDOT Environmental Coordination and Permitting.
Jeff Robbins.
Good afternoon, Jeff Robbins, Executive Director at Clean Air NC, community-based organization.
Thank you, Jeff. Juan Garcia.
Good afternoon, Juan Garcia, Senior Transportation Planner for Gaston County.
Christy Brantley. Oh wait, I already did you, Christy. You don't have to go again. All right, next, it just says Mary.
Hey, this is Mary Plummer with the DEQ Division of Water Resources.
All right, thank you, Mary. Next up, Matthew Hoskins.
Good afternoon, everybody. Matthew Hoskins with North Carolina Division of Air Quality.
Thank you. Megan Green.
Hi, Megan Green with Mecklenburg County Air Quality.
Thank you. Stephen Rice.
Hi, afternoon, everybody. Stephen Rice, North Carolina Division of Air Quality.
Thank you, Stephen. Suzanne Mason.
Hi, everybody. Suzanne Mason, Conservation Data Manager with the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program.
Very good. Teresa Campo.
Hi, I'm Teresa Campo with the City of Monroe City Manager's Office. I'm the Strategic Projects Manager.
All right, thank you, Teresa. Tiffany Fant.
Good day from New Orleans, but a definite Charlotte native, Soul Nation Executive Director.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. All right, Todd Paisley.
Todd Paisley, North Carolina Division of Air Quality, Planning Section.
And Usha Bada.
Her microphone might not be working. She's with the Division of Air Quality.
Very good. All right, and did I miss anybody?
Hi, Allison. I'm Ann Brooks with the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance.
Thank you, Ann. Anybody else I may have missed? All right, and I did see a comment in the chat from you, Brian, about the Teams meeting link.
I think I got everybody over here. I put the link into the chat and
Thank you so much.
no problem. I was wondering why nobody was
that.
speaking.
Oh, that helps a lot. I appreciate that. Okay, well, with that, we have, as you can tell from our discussion topics list here today, quite a few things to cover. We're going to go ahead and get the ball rolling with a brief overview of what we've been doing up to date, and just to give you a little bit of insight into our process. So many of you all, just hearing some of the backgrounds that you're coming to this meeting with, are aware of the metropolitan transportation planning process. But I do just want to give a little bit of background, building on what Neil teed us up with, to let you all know that this is the federal long-range planning document for the Charlotte regional area. And as Neil mentioned, this is something that is updated on an every 4-year cycle. We do look at all of our different travel modes and think about this from kind of that long-term visioning scale all the way to a nearer term planning horizon as well. And I think one of the big takeaways for this is that this is essentially the first stop for requiring access to federal funds for our transportation projects. So a project needs to be included in this 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan if it is going to be considered to progress into the region's transportation improvement program, which is the shorter term document that actually helps us move forward with the obligation of those federal and state funds. This also helps us establish our policies moving forward for our transportation improvements. So some of the key components that help us actually achieve some of those goals start all the way with the development of goals and objectives to getting a snapshot of our existing conditions for the area. You'll hear more about many of these areas like scenario planning, revenue forecasting, project evaluation, and even congestion management processes as we go forward. And then also public engagement, which is a huge component of everything that we do to make sure that we are headed in the right direction. Looking forward with our schedule, this process actually started back in 2024. But just to give you a snapshot of what we've been doing this year and how the project is expected to conclude in 2026, we began the year with scenario planning and revenue forecasting. And then we've continued with project evaluation and our congestion management process into the middle of the year. We have just concluded our second round of public involvement. We'll hear a little bit more about that later. And right now we're in the process of putting all of these pieces together with our project evaluation and fiscal constraint determination. This all culminates in 2026 with the preparation of our documentation and ultimate plan adoption. I mentioned engagement. There have been 2 phases that have already been conducted. We started this back in 2024, as I mentioned, with our project kickoff and understanding those transportation needs. And then our second phase of engagement was really focused on our draft recommendations and getting some feedback on those. We will have a third phase toward the latter part of this year and beginning of next year to review the plan as it comes together and validate the contents of that plan. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Nat, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about some of the recent milestones that have been achieved and some of the major project efforts that we have underway.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Allison mentioned our existing conditions work. As you can imagine, a big part of trying to update sort of the shared vision for transportation around the region involves understanding what transportation looks like today. And so we sort of take a snapshot and look at a variety of different components that influence transportation in the region, that are influenced by transportation in the region, and specifically what our network looks like today. And so you can see kind of a list of all those different things that we looked at in our existing conditions report, kind of taking that snapshot level throughout. I'd like to make a plug that this document is available online and at 2055mtp.org. At CRTPO's website, so you can take a look and peruse it. Heavy on maps and infographics to kind of tell the story about the needs for transportation around the region. There's also some really great information related to how we compare to our peers around in other regions around the country. And so definitely would hope you all take a second to take a closer look at that at some point. And I see Travis just dropped a link to that in the chat, so feel free to access it from there. Thanks, Travis. Another kind of critical component of our kind of previous milestones to help as we build toward our recommendations was looking at making sure that we're aligning our transportation vision with land use and with growth, right? Charlotte region is very quickly growing, as you all know. And so our goal here was to build off of some land use scenario planning that was conducted during the previous MTP cycle, during the 2050 MTP. And so what we wanted to do was kind of evaluate a few different scenarios, along with a couple alternative different paths we can take. And so we looked at different land use patterns based on kind of a current trend of growth that might be more sprawling and less kind of centralized, versus growth patterns that might be more centralized, more kind of nodal in their application. And then we also looked at a few different kind of alternative scenarios for work from home percentages and things like that to kind of determine what some impacts on our transportation network might look like. I'm going through this at a really high level, right? It's too much to kind of get to in too much detail, but again, I'll make a plug for another kind of deliverable of our process so far. This is our scenario planning scorecard, which sort of outlines the different comparisons between the different scenarios and organizes those by topic and by category. You can kind of view those results geographically on maps and through some statistics that we showcase. I believe Travis has dropped that in the chat as well. Thank you, Travis. So please take a look at that when you get a chance. Important note about the scenario planning scorecard, existing conditions report. These were all resources that were available for our member jurisdictions as they considered which projects they wanted to submit for project evaluation. We're going to talk here more about that in a moment. So the idea was that we wanted to provide as much data, many resources as we could to help member jurisdictions make informed decisions about what their future transportation should look like in their communities. Allison touched on engagement earlier. We had a kind of a three-phase engagement process. Last year was all about our phase one of engagement. And so a lot of this is about sort of kicking off the project with the public, orienting them to what the MTP is, what the purpose is, how they can influence the process, and so on and so forth. So lots of awareness building about opportunities to engage, but also the plan itself, with the goal of identifying, continuing to identify needs around the region. We also had a draft set of goals and objectives for the plan that we put forth in front of the public, and we also showcased those existing conditions that I touched on earlier. The goal is similarly to the scenario planning report card, as well as the existing conditions report. The goal here was to provide our member jurisdictions with as many resources as they had possible, data, but also in this case, feedback directly from the public about what they would like to see in their communities. And we also have a summary report of our first phase of engagement that Travis has conveniently dropped into the chat again. Thank you, Travis. So I'll walk through a little bit of that here. Our phase one activities kind of largely organized around these three pieces. Obviously, a big component was digital engagement. We had an online survey that folks took, as well as some interactive mapping where people could leave pins, mark different corridors or projects that they think had opportunity or need for improvement. And we took a little bit of a different tact compared to some past engagement efforts. I think this is a super large region, and we know that it's often tough, especially for a region of this size, to have sort of a few kind of sporadic events where we asked folks to come to us from around the region, and we thought it was more critical to go to the public. And so working with the CRTPO staff and the consultant team, we identified a big slate of different pop-up events where we could set up booths and provide information about the project, QR codes for the digital engagement, or even some in-person engagement for folks to do. The goal was that those would be conducted across all three counties across the planning area, and they were really successful. And in addition to that, we also were really intentional about creating opportunity for voices that may traditionally be left out of the planning process or feel like they don't have the opportunity to engage in the process. And so we worked with neighborhood leaders, community advocates, local staff around the different communities around the region to conduct equity focus groups. And so the goal here was that these were small groups in communities that are kind of traditionally left behind in the planning process. And so these are lower income communities, minority communities that had the opportunity to come in, speak with us directly with some more targeted kind of engagement and feedback, and so that we could kind of put that same feedback up against kind of our broader regional feedback as well. So I mentioned those pop-up events. We had, I think it was 10 during phase one, and you can see really try to get a good distribution of those across all the different counties. Lots of attendance at all those different events, and so we felt like we were able to provide opportunity for a lot of people to engage in our process should they wish. And again, you can see some of the feedback we've heard from folks during our in our phase one engagement summary. So moving on to work that we are kind of been working on this year, actively kind of working on, and that's kind of out in front of the public right now. That really starts with our roadway project evaluation. So big part of our process is to create a fiscally constrained project list of roadway projects and transit projects, and that's really broken down into sort of at a high level, kind of a 3-step process. First step, we give the jurisdictions around the region in the planning area the opportunity to submit projects for that to be evaluated as part of the plan. And so that project submission window was back in January through February, and we had an online tool that allowed each jurisdiction to submit the projects that they wish to be included as part of the evaluation. And then the second phase of the work is to actually evaluate those projects. And so we spent March through May working with what we call our Roadway Ranking Review Committee, or what our R3C committee. And I'll talk more about that R3C group here in a moment, but the goal of that group is to actually work through the evaluation, the prioritization, and scoring of all those projects. And third step is to actually apply fiscal constraint. And so that means using revenues that we've projected over the horizon years of the plan to actually identify which projects could actually be, theoretically be implemented within the lifetime of the plan. So across the calendar, it's sort of that full process kind of stretched from the evaluation process stretched from kind of March all the way through July. So we have a 2-tier evaluation process, which I'll touch here on in a moment. That happens in March and April. In May, we applied the fiscal constraint. And then in June and July, we had that draft fiscally constrained project list available for the public and presented to the CCC and board, technical coordinating committee and the CRTPO board. So a little more detail on the actual evaluation of the roadway projects. I mentioned the submission phase of the work. What we did was we had a submission workshop with the technical coordinating committee back in January, where we walked them through our project submission tool, worked through any questions in real time about how to submit projects, what types of projects to submit, what information to provide as a part of that process was all done then. That submission window I mentioned was in January and February. It's from January 13th through February 14th. And then we spent kind of the rest of February kind of confirming the submissions and cleaning those up as needed. Additionally, we worked really closely with our R3C. This is our Roadway Ranking Review Committee. This was a subset of our advisory committee. Our advisory committee helps us kind of guide the process at key milestones. We meet with them every other month. And so we had representation on our ranking, our R3C, from jurisdictions across all 3 counties in our planning area, and we met with them 7 or 8 times, I believe, and actually worked through scoring live together in real time to make sure that we had an open, transparent, and defensible process for evaluating and scoring these projects. So how do we actually score and prioritize these projects? I mentioned it's a two-tier approach. That first tier is all about evaluating the need. And so we look at congestion, look at safety, look at access to employment. And these are kind of highly quantitative metrics. We use data pulled from the regional travel demand model, work closely with the regional modeling team staff to help quantify those data points. And as projects are scored for tier 1, we take a subset of those, the highest scoring tier 1 projects, and push them down into tier 2 to measure the sustainability of those projects. And so this is when we get into a little bit more kind of qualitative scoring, spatial analysis scoring. And so we look at each project's impact on environmental justice, natural resources, historic resources, community resources, equitable access, as well as connectivity and benefit cost. One thing I'll note is that the equitable access criteria here, as well as benefit cost, are also more quantitative evaluation metrics using methodologies that have been previously been determined. And so we didn't specifically work through those pieces with the R3C, just the more qualitative portions. I'll say as well that this methodology and the actual quantitative methodology for calculating any of these criteria is one that was used during previous cycles and was reviewed by all of our various project committees, as well as the R3C, and also presented to the TCC and board and agreed that we would carry forward the same set of criteria, the same scoring, and the same methodology into the 2055 process. So as a project moves on from tier 1 to tier 2, I mentioned that we sat down with our R3C and actually worked through the scoring for each one of those projects. Just want to kind of show you all an example here of what that sort of looks like. And so just for example, we pulled Morgan Mill Road here. You can see that project highlighted on the right. This is down in Union County in Monroe. And what you're seeing here on the right is a screenshot from our kind of digital online mapping tool that we use as part of this process. It's not very pretty, right? We got a lot of different data sets and things that we've got in there, layers we turn on and off as we work through it as a group. But the idea is that we highlight each project, identify a specific buffer around that project, and then assess the different impacts that project might have on the environment. And so I mentioned all those things earlier, but you can see some of those different dots, orange dots, blue dots. You can see different kind of colored census tracts and block groups here, as well as environmental features. And depending on the amount of those things that fell within that project buffer, it would receive a particular score based on our identified methodology. And so we would pull up each project, turn layers on as we went through each individual criteria to determine a particular score for any particular project. So after all the projects are scored, our goal then is to actually apply fiscal constraint to determine which of those projects that are highest scoring we actually feel like we can implement within the timeframe of the plan. And so here's a little flow chart for how that works. You kind of mentioned some of this before, but it starts with receiving all the project submissions and scoring those, and then also determining our financial projections, how much revenue we might project there to be available over the lifetime of the plan. And so then we compare that prioritized project list to the financial projections, revenue projections that we've conducted, and then we use that to develop that fiscally constrained project list. And at a really high level, once again, that process for developing that list breaks down into those kind of 3 steps, right? We complete that evaluation, and we sort each project into the different state transportation improvement category tiers, those SCI tiers. Then we compare those adopted revenue projections against those projects that were scored there. A key note here is that we use future year dollars, so we do show inflation and escalation across those future years. and then we assign those different projects to available cost bands based on their tier 1 and tier 2 scores, right, across those STI categories. So we worked with our R3C to do that. We had 2 different horizon year bands that we applied fiscal constraint to. That would be 2036 to 2045, as well as 2046 to 2055. Just to note that the 2025 horizon year and the 2035 horizon year for cost bands we allocated all of the STIP projects to those years. And so those are already existing committed projects there. And then anything that was evaluated as part of our project process and wasn't able to be fiscally constrained to an actual horizon year was placed in what we call our unfunded vision bucket. So the goal with the R3C was to fund as many projects as possible. That may seem elementary, but my point in saying that is that the group didn't always necessarily go down one by one and assign the top scoring projects into each horizon band. In places where we maybe had some projects that were really expensive, we might have skipped over it in order to put a few more projects right into that list rather than just one, especially if that one wasn't able to be scored or wasn't able to be accommodated into the horizon band based on its cost. I mentioned inflation earlier. We used a 4% inflation rate in order to scale those project costs. So if as a particular project got pushed out from 2045 into 2055, we escalated or we used that inflation rate to escalate that project cost into those particular years. And so what that ultimately looks like is that we were able, you can see here sort of the representation, the number of projects that we were able to fiscally constrain across the different STI categories. So there's the statewide mobility category, there's Region E, there's Region F, Division 10, and Division 12. And so you can see the very top row, the total number of projects that were submitted before the evaluation even took place. So these are the total number of projects submitted by the jurisdictions. We sorted those into the different STI categories and then conducted that tier 1 evaluation scoring. And then based on that scoring, you can see the number of projects that moved on to the second tier of scoring. And so once we scored those, we applied the fiscal constraint. And in that first kind of darker blue column in the middle, fiscally constrained projects, you can see the number of projects across each STI category that were fiscally constrained. And then you can see that's kind of broken down by the particular cost band. And then below that in gray, you can see the unfunded vision categories where the remaining projects in tier 2 that weren't able to make it into the fiscally constrained project list live in that unfunded vision group. So it's a lot of numbers there. Put it even more simply, we've got 93 projects that are existing and committed, meaning that they fall within that 2025 and 2035 horizon year band. We've got 73 new fiscally constrained projects. These are projects that fall within the 2045 and 2055 band. And then we've got a total of 123 additional unfunded projects that are inclusive of both projects that were scored in tier 1 and those that made it all the way to tier 2 but weren't fiscally constrained. So after completing that process, a big part of our second phase of engagement was to put that fiscally constrained project list in front of the public and give them the chance to review that. And so we just kind of recently completed our second phase of engagement. That public comment period ran from June 19th through July 19th. So it recently wrapped up. The purpose of that engagement phase was to create a little bit of a feedback loop. We want to talk through what we had heard as a part of phase 1 so that it was clear how feedback from the public was able to be used as a resource to influence the draft fiscally constrained project list. We wanted to talk through any other kind of key milestones in our process to that date. And then, of course, create some awareness about the fiscally constrained project list, how it was developed, how it will be used. Obviously, it's can be quite technical for people who don't look at these kinds of things every day, like a lot of us. And so we tried our best to make it really clear how these things were developed, provide a lot of opportunity for us to meet with folks at pop-up events or otherwise, and for them to learn about that, so that they could provide any feedback that they wished on that fiscally constrained project list. Once again, our goal here is to then take that information, provide it back to the member jurisdictions as a resource for them to consider as they consider actually adopting the fiscally constrained project list. So phase 2 engagement activities, a lot like our phase 1. We had our digital engagement, our pop-up events, and our equity focus groups. We also conducted a round of stakeholder meetings where we organized kind of 3 kind of topical meetings for some various stakeholders that wanted to have some more direct contact with us about particular subjects. This was economic development and kind of movement of people and goods, freight movement, as well as sustainability. And we invited stakeholders from around the planning area to participate in those meetings. Our pop-up events for phase 2, you can see that list here. Big shout out, I think, in general to Judy and to Merritt and the whole CRTPO staff who did such an amazing job identifying all these dates, staffing all these events, connecting with a ton of people. It was a huge amount of work, and I would venture to say it's probably the most robust as a whole. Phase 2 and phase 1, the most robust kind of public engagement kind of effort that the CRTPO has been through before. So it's a huge lift. Big kudos to the CRTPO staff for going through all that. But again, you can see here, goal was to create lots of geographic diversity to allow tons of opportunity for folks to engage in that process. You can see some great images of that here. The CRTPO staff meeting with folks from around the community to talk through the draft fiscal constrained project list, how they can provide that feedback, so on and so forth. I mentioned equity focus groups that we did in phase 1. We also conducted those in phase 2 as well. And so you can see all of those meetings here. Again, for also goal to provide kind of geographic parity across the planning area. And a great thing we did here as well was to conduct one of those fully in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking communities as well. Additionally, I mentioned those stakeholder meetings that we had as a part of our phase 2 of engagement. There was also a couple different community presentations at Western Union Municipal Alliance. We also had a youth activity to try and engage some of the younger members of the community. You see a great picture of Merritt there conducting a radio interview in Spanish, and which was a great way to kind of get awareness out about the opportunity for folks to engage, especially those who don't speak English. And then, every month the CRTPO has their standing board meetings where residents can sign up to speak at any point. So all that being said, I think we feel really great and confident about the opportunity that folks had to engage in this process, and we feel great about the feedback that we've gotten too. At a really high level, just to kind of give you a sense of kind of the quantity of feedback we received on the fiscally constrained project list, kind of broken that down here into 3 different pieces: roadway projects, intersection projects, and transit projects. I won't read through all these here, but you can kind of get a sense of the numbers here. What we ask folks to do is essentially upvote or downvote particular projects, provide open-ended comments should they wish. So you can see kind of representation of some of those quantities here, as well as some of the projects that received the most upvotes across those different project types. Travis is also, again, right on time, dropping in a PDF link in the chat of the phase 2 engagement summary. You can kind of dig into some of those more qualitative details if you'd like. Like I said, that phase 2 summary is ready and available for review, and these results and feedback are being provided directly to those member jurisdictions to use as a resource. So that's kind of concludes the bulk of the work that we've been working through over the kind of the first half of this year. I'm going to toss it back to Allison to maybe touch on a couple additional items as well as kind of look ahead the direction we're going.
Thanks, Nat. And as you all can tell, this is a big effort to put these plans together. There are a lot of moving parts. Neil teed this up well at the beginning. Whenever we put these together, we are mindful from the start of our federal requirements and our state priorities. But we also want to understand the perspectives of the different agencies that play a role in helping to move some of these projects from their conceptual stage, as we are right now, to ultimately putting the pieces together towards implementation, which is where kind of the MTP is ultimately headed. So we want to just really quickly give you a peek into some of our ongoing and upcoming work, because obviously we're not done yet. And then Neil is going to kind of bring us home with the ask that we have of you all going forward. So starting with our congestion management process, I mentioned those federal requirements. This is actually a separate standalone federally required process for any transportation management area, which is defined as an urban area of 200,000 people or more. So obviously the Charlotte area qualifies as that. And one of the nice things that CRTPO is elected to do is actually update their CMP alongside their Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So this is a nice way for those two documents to kind of get in sync with each other. So we're working on that right now. It's going to be memorialized within this document that we're preparing for the MTP. As you can see on the next slide, one of the things that we're doing is actually identifying congested corridors just based on the data that we have. And we're actually going to be asking people to identify some strategies to help mitigate congestion that can be used, whether it's for projects in this plan or even for projects in other plans that could be developed later on, thinking even more at a policy and programmatic level going forward. On our next slide, we also are looking at our active transportation modes and developing a tool that communities can use to develop corridors and identify those for the highest need for bicycle and pedestrian investment. So we've had the opportunity to work very closely with the Bikehead work group for CRTPO in the development of this tool. And that's something that's going to help us make better use and I guess apply some strategic thinking for some of those active transportation corridors going forward. You can see on the next slide the general approach for that ATC tool update, starting with a really more grassroots understanding, working with that committee of what the needs and priorities are, assessing the tool that was used in the past plan. We've actually looked outside this region to understand what other communities are doing, what other regions are doing. And that is all culminating with the updated tool development, and we'll hopefully look to roll that forward into its application. And then the final thought I'd leave you all with that we're doing right now is on the next slide about our financial projections. Nat walked us through some of the things that are primarily focused around roadway and our major public transportation projects, but we do have to have a comprehensive assessment of our revenues across all of our travel modes. And so that's something that we are in the process of getting wrapped up right now, whether that's for all of our operations and maintenance and capital for public transportation, for our maintenance forecasts, or even understanding the portion of our roadway capital that goes to our MPO discretionary forecast. So with that, I'd like to turn this back over to Neil, and he can give us some thoughts about where we go from here and some of the requests that we would have from you all.
Thanks, Allison and Nat, for all the information there. I know there's a lot on those slides. We do plan on sending the slide deck out, as well as a link to the video recording. And our requested action of you all is to review the information that we provide. Any questions or comments that you have, we have about 10 minutes for open discussion. But feel free to email those to Judy Dellert at CRTPO. We do have a deadline of August 19th. But, just some of the input that we're looking for. Do you have any comments or questions about the plan or the planning process for the 2055 MTP? Based upon the agency that you represent or your area of expertise, do you have additional information or concerns about the projects within the draft project lists that need further evaluation, specifically environmental impacts related to any projects that may not have been identified, or other existing or proposed built environment impacts. For instance, proposed developments that would affect projects within the list. And then also, if you have suggestions for improving engagement between CRTPO and your agency, we would like to hear that type of feedback as well. So, and again, just some process things once we conclude today. Judy will email this presentation and the video to the attendees. We do have a deadline of August 19th for any comments to be emailed to Judy. The reason behind that is the CRTPO board will receive a presentation on the fiscally constrained project list at their meeting on August 20th, and there is action requested for the board to approve the project list. So any comments that we receive from attendees and your respective agencies will be incorporated within that presentation. So I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions or comments from the attendees this afternoon. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, great work. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this, and obviously it's a huge team effort. So, hats off. I think the thing that I observe is there's two areas. Obviously, communities we work in where there's an air quality impact, but less so. I look at things that are in the areas that I live in, even though I work in a pretty vast area around the city and the state. If I'm to look at this constrained project roadway project list and see things in gray, are we to assume that those are, it says unfunded, so those projects would not be covered in this plan? That's just my normal assumption, and that sounds simple, I know, but is that in fact the case?
That's accurate, Jeff. And those were projects that were submitted by member jurisdictions and brought through that two-tiered evaluation process.
Right.
And as part of that, we have financial projections. So as every time we do this, there are always more project requests than available funding. So unfortunately, we were not able to include those projects within the fiscally constrained list. However, we will retain the data, that was compiled for those projects. That data will be available within the appendix. But, as part of the federal requirement, we're really focused on the projects that are included within the fiscally constrained project list.
I got you. Because I live in the area of Pineville, and there was only one project that I saw, which is incredibly important to us because, or to me at least, as it relates to the amount of congestion in land conversion, where it was natural land at one time, and it's being seriously considered for building. I do my own air quality monitoring, and I see spikes and things of that nature. So there's definitely a concern that project didn't raise to the level, and I guess that's the follow-up and final question I have in terms of the follow-up to my local participants in the process, and having a more detailed conversation would probably be a good first step. I would assume as well.
Yeah, we're happy to continue, to meet with you and your constituents, provide additional information about the process. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do update this plan every 4 years.
Okay.
There also are other funding opportunities. The CRTPO does receive roughly $30 million in federal discretionary funds for projects. So typically the projects in this process are much more larger in scope or in scale. But the town of Pineville, or the city of Charlotte, NCDOT could consider applying for funding to maybe address some hot spots within that particular corridor.
Okay. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And again, there's opportunity over the next 5 minutes or so for discussion or questions. Otherwise, you will receive an email from Judy, and you'll have some time to review the presentation and the links that we provided this afternoon, and provide us with any feedback via email. by next Tuesday. So I'll pause again, see if there are one last call for questions or comments about the webinar this afternoon. All right, well, seeing and hearing none, I do want to thank everybody for attending again this afternoon. And we look forward to any feedback that you have regarding the MTP. And again, if there are opportunities for additional meetings with your agency or presentations or meetings, yeah, we're happy to do that here at CRTPO. So again, thank you for joining us. Hope you all have a good afternoon and good rest of your week. Well, thanks again, everybody. I thought that went well. We had good participation across several different agencies.